The Hay River track runs southwards from the Batten Hill camp through the north eastern Simpson down to Popal Corner. First stop off on this trip is the Batten Hill camp, which is really good place to stay overnight. Plenty of firewood, wood-fired showers for the morning. Really lovely place. Definitely aim to stop there. We did this trip in our 80 Series Land Cruiser, which was great. Just a note that you need a Central Land Council permit to travel the northern section of the Hay River track, so that can be obtained a few weeks before you travel. The track is generally fairly smooth. When we were there was not a lot of rutting or corrugations, and travelling was actually fairly quick. The Hay River track through the northern section was fairly flat. You don't really follow or see the Hay River itself. It's a little way to the west, I think. This location was the dingo well. This is a site set up to help restore the dingo populations in the desert by essentially pumping water up into a shallow bore. The aim is that by bringing back the dingoes, it will reintroduce more of the native ecology for the broader ecosystem. Here we are travelling out onto Lake Caroline, which is a big empty lake, basically a clay pan. It was huge. It's about 11 kilometres off the Hay River track. Coming back out on the Lake Caroline track, you pass through some shallow lake beds, and a lot of them have these gibber across them, which are quite interesting, very similar to parts of the Strzelecki Desert. You can see here we are coming up on a small gibber plain. Here we are crossing back across the actual riverbed. Surprisingly, it was very sandy, very deep sand and dry, and you definitely need your tyre pressures down to come across here. We were running 18 psi, but in all honesty, you could have gone a bit lower to make it a bit easier. You can see that there's no real defined track across the riverbed. It's actually quite broad. It's probably nearly a kilometre wide, and people have taken tracks all over the place looking for solid sand. Here we are coming out now and joining back onto the Hay River track. It's well signposted. There's lots of little signs here and there just telling you where you are, so you can't really get lost along it. You can see here the vegetation changed, so we're sort of following along the edge of the old river. At this point, sort of after Lake Caroline, you could tell that the landscape was starting to rise, so we were heading upstream quite clearly because we were constantly travelling on a very shallow grade uphill. Started to see a few little sand hills here and there. You can see one just then was off to the left. Here we are on day two, very early in the morning. Unfortunately, the flies were pretty heavy in May, so we were getting going fairly early to avoid getting overrun during breakfast. Track was very similar to the first day, but it did wind in and out, and we were vaguely following the old riverbed or river waterway, which was very ill-defined at times. A lot of fun. Not a lot of animals, but the vegetation was really interesting, and it varied quite dramatically every half an hour or so. later in the morning, started to open up more into a big plains, a lot less, probably less ground cover, a bit more sandy, and in the distance you could actually start to see the sand dunes of the Simpson proper, the Channel Country sort of starting to appear. So we were starting to go up some really shallow sand dunes and gradually climbing our way up through the Hay River catchment. Here's the start of the series of sand dunes. Had to have a bit of a run up to get over some of them. Tyre pressures are the key here. There's probably a good hour's worth of driving through some sand dunes, so you do change direction and head sort of west and across the sand dunes rather than driving between them, so you suddenly get to do some climbing up and down. There was a lot of evidence of camel activity through the desert in this area. You can see as we come over the top of this sand dune, there's lots of camel tracks on the left hand side of the track. They've been there overnight. We did see quite a few camels through this section of the Hay River. Actually, there's the camel tracks on the left of the track there. We were literally coming across thousands of tracks every day, but we didn't see many camels though. They were there but well hidden. Following the sand dune section, the track heads almost due south towards Popel's Corner. It's pretty easy going from this point on. Almost certainly this section of the track was made during the early petroleum exploration days way back. The Hay River track is an easy 2 to 3 day drive. It's about 350 k's and I would say it's fairly easy for driving.